We're back, joined now by New York Times columnist David Brooks and columnist for The Washington Post, E.J. Dionne. Welcome. Brooks and Dionne, almost like the country music act, but not quite. Anyway, so much to get to here with this oil spill. You know, the president in his press conference, I thought, summed it up with one line about what it is he's facing, that this crisis and accountability reaches to the edge of his bathroom when he's shaving. This is what he said.
When I woke up this morning and I'm shaving and Malia knocks on my bathroom door and she peeks in her head and she says, did you plug the hole yet, Daddy?
I mean, it really comes back to that, EJ. I've been asked this week, well, what does the president do to do a better job, you know, connecting on all this? You plug the leak is what you do. And we heard this morning that it hasn't happened. Carol Browner saying worst environmental disaster in the country's history.
Well, you know, I think the frustrating thing is that we think government has all kinds of power, and then we discover that when something like this happens, when even people who are anti-government want the government to have power to do something, turns out most of the capacity to stop this is in the hands of BP. And I think the president had this ambiguity at this news conference where he kept saying we're in charge, but we all know that the equipment and basically most of the judgments are being made by a private company. So this puts him in a terrible position. And I think a question you kept asking in the earlier part of the show is the one that haunts me, which is, why isn't it that we, meaning BP in this case, weren't prepared for the worst possible case? And, you know, I think we're going to sort of look at our whole environmental argument a little differently. Environmentalists, people always say, oh, those environmentalists, they only look at the worst case scenario. Well, suddenly we are confronted with it. And I think we're going to have to rethink on some of these very complicated things we're doing, deep water drilling being one of them. Do we have to think a whole lot more about the worst case than we used to?
Well, look what we started doing in government post 9/11. The continuity of government planning that went on, that only was the very worst possible scenario envisioned. And that's why, you know, members of the administration go to secret locations to practice these. David Brooks, how is the administration doing?
Well, it depends what you expect. You know, if you think government is the center of national life, the government can do everything, then you're disappointed. But for those of us who don't expect that of government, who know there are limits to government power, then people say, oh, he should do something. James Carville says that. Well, what exactly he should do? He doesn't have a degree in underwater engineering. I don't expect government to do everything, and I don't expect they will be able to do everything. And so we're going to have to live with this, live with the awareness that there are limits to what government can do. I do think this is a big moment, though. The failure of the Top Kill, I do think is a big moment, because we could be facing really weeks or months of that image, and that image of the oil spewing out will become the central image of the year. And for President Obama, who's had a really heroic presidency for the first year, now he's entering a period of a limited presidency, limits to his power, limits to money. It's a different type of presidency, and that image will be the core image of the year.
EJ, I mean, I think we might be able to bring up that image, the notion that you can go to a live image of an oil leak that is out of control. You talk about the split-screen version of a presidency. You know, I mean, there it is now. I mean, this question that keeps coming up, is the shorthand in Washington, is this Obama's Katrina?
Yeah, and I think the answer is it's not Obama's Katrina, but it's a huge problem for the president. You know, David has said that the government can't do everything, and I think almost everybody agrees with that. I think socialists agree with that. I think that's not the issue. The issue is what could government have done earlier on. We learn now from the New York Times this morning that BP 11 months ago had a sense that they had a problem here. What was done about it? Was there a role for the regulator to look into this, to have a greater opportunity to look into this? We learned that the Minerals Management Service, in some cases, the companies would fill out these forms in pencil and then, you know, that would be ratified. So, yeah, we can't have government doing everything, but we're looking for more competent government, which is what President Obama promised. That's why this is such a big test for him, and it's the worst test he could possibly face because government's capacity in this is limited.
Let me move on to another area of limitation for the administration, and that's politically. Joe Sestak, who wants to be the senator from Pennsylvania, the Democrat, took on Arlen Specter, took on the White House even, was where you are just last week. And I asked him about this notion that the administration offered him a job to get out of the way. This is how the exchange went. What job were you offered to stay out of a primary race by the administration?
It was interesting. I was asked a question about something that happened months earlier, and I felt I should answer it honestly. And that's all I had to say about it.
Yes or no? Straightforward question. Were you offered a job, and what was the job?
I was offered a job, and I answered that.
Turns out the White House counsel's office put out a report saying he was offered a spot, a government position on a presidential commission. He could have kept his role as congressman. And it was Bill Clinton, the former president dispatched by Rahm Emanuel to see whether he'd accept that and not run. David, what's the big issue here?
Well, the big issue is that the president has said, he's tired of the small-minded politics in Washington. He's exasperated by all the pettiness. But the fact is, if I once see them not take a chance to be petty and small-minded in politics as usual, I'd like to see that. Because they practice the same rules that everybody else practices. To give people jobs, to help to push people out of the races. It's not illegal. It's not a big scandal, but it's politics as usual. And that's what they do. That's what most politicians do. I just wish they wouldn't pretend so much they're not doing any of that stuff.
EJ, is the bigger issue that they seemed rather ham-handed in their intervention, that if you're going to use Bill Clinton, you should be able to carry something like this off?
Well, first of all, the original sin here is bragging by Joe Sestak during the primaries, where he was trying to make the point, I'm standing up to the Obama people running against Arlen Specter, and he sort of put this on the table himself, and then suddenly there's a blowback afterward. And I think David's right in this sense that the notion that somehow offering somebody a job connected to politics, if that were uniformly enforced, God knows how many people would go to jail. What they've done here is constructed a story, which we all hope is true, that seems to get around any legal restriction on offering the guy a job. It's just...
We're better than Washington, better than the lame brains of the press corps. That's been an underlying theme for the last couple of weeks from the administration. And when you match it to the things they actually do, it just doesn't match.
I want to end on a note about the economy. We did this Meet the Press Across America forum this week in Minnesota with Governor Pawlenty, and I asked him a question about the economy, and I thought his response was interesting in terms of framing the Republican argument on the economy, which is still a big issue, against the administration. Let's watch.
The economy now is growing. It's on track to create on the order of 1.7 million jobs this year. If that happens, does the Obama administration deserve credit for a turnaround?
You can't push this much money into the economy in the near term and not have it have some effect. But what I would suggest to you is its phony effect. I think you're going to see in 2011, 2012, if you don't have the private economy pick up the slack of the phony inflation of the economy over the next couple of years, you're going to trigger a whole set of other adverse events, including potentially inflation. But President Obama, if this economy recovers and stays recovered, will get due credit. But I would suggest to you, at least in the intermediate and long term, that's not what's going to happen.
EJ?
The jobs created from the stimulus are largely in the private sector. It's rule number one of economics that when the government pushes out this money, it has an effect across the economy. We'll see if Governor Pawlenty will indeed give them credit in 2 years if the economy is moving. You should have him back on.
Yeah, well, I think we'll do that. We're going to leave it there. Thank you both. A reminder, you can watch our entire Meet the Press Across America forum with Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty. It's on our website, mtp.msnbc.com. And our thanks to our Twin Cities affiliate, KARE 11, for partnering with us for that event.